I understand that sense of expectation because I've kind of had a bit of that myself. I've not been a fan of Zack Snyder in the past, and seeing the trailers for Man of Steel, which there is a reason why it's called that, certainly that sense of expectation has been high. The most interesting thing about Superman was always the weaknesses. In his earliest incarnations, the whole idea was, that coming from Krypton, where the gravity was stronger, come down to Earth, therefore his body is stronger. And he could do things like he could run faster than a train. He could leap. Well, firstly, he could leap 15 yards, then he could leap tall buildings at a single bound. Later on came the more superpowers, the X-ray vision, and then the ability to fly, which has always been, the tagline of the Superman 1, you'll believe a man can fly. The question about why Superman can fly is always the great unanswered one.
I think you might be taking it too seriously.
No. But he starts out jumping, then he flies. And so the difficulty with Superman is if he's indestructible, how do you give him weaknesses, therefore make him interesting? So all the Superman stories have struggled to put a weakness in there, whether it's kryptonite, or whether it's the need to hide his identity, or whether it's his love for Lois Lane, or whether it's relationship with his parents and his lost parents. These are the things which give Superman the weaknesses. Now, the trailers for Man of Steel seem to focus on those. You get that idea of it's a film about a man of steel. And the fact they're saying steel, you said yourself, why Man of Steel? I mean, he's indestructible, because actually I think it seems to be referring back to that idea that steel is breakable, steel is meltable, and certainly.
It also, sorry to interrupt, but it's because steel is, as far as never referred to.
No, except that when it's an enigmatic way of saying Superman without saying Superman. Of course, actually, the word Superman is used maybe a couple of times and always apologetically. Somebody says, "I'm sorry, sir," it's what they're calling him, and so. All the interesting stuff in the film is the stuff which is flagged up in that quite charismatic, quite enigmatic trailer with the little kid putting on the cape and running between the clotheslines, and the Kevin Costner character sort of looking at him. All that stuff is the interesting part of the film, and the film that I really wanted. The least interesting stuff is the flying, the crashing, the banging, and it has to be said that the third act of the film, which goes on for about 40 minutes, is insane flying, crashing, banging, in which everything gets blown up twice, and in which the great big dramatic climax is rather like the end of a heavy metal song, which goes boom. You think it's finished, but you realise actually he's going into a drum solo and it's going to start again. And the problem is, for me, having come out of the film, the part of it I like the least is that last act. In the last act, when buildings fell down and everything got blown up and everything in which the central character, him, and appeared to be indestructible, I lost interest and I did get bored. Now, the film therefore seems to be pulling in two different directions, and it would be really easy for me to say, well, the two different directions are, on the one hand, Chris Nolan doing all the valued stuff, on the other hand, Zack Snyder doing the buildings falling down. But actually, that's patently not true. I mean, all the early Smallville stuff is actually very Snyder. It's got that kind of advertising aesthetic grunge feel. And Nolan is not above doing great big overblown climaxes. A lot of people felt, for example, in the Batman film, the final Batman film, Dark Knight Rises, that there was a similar build towards a great big. I mean, he ends with atom bombs and fights. The difference is that in Batman, when all that stuff is going on, I still centrally care about the characters, and the tension is in the character of Superman itself. The problems with the film were encapsulated in one thing, when they'd spend a lot of time talking about the fact that when Superman gets to Earth's air is richer, therefore he will be stronger. And there are other characters who come from space, who have to wear breathing masks. There's a lot of stuff about the quality of the air. And then at some point they seem to forget about it and have Superman breathing in space. And I was going, hang about a minute. A minute ago, Superman couldn't breathe the oxygen. That was wrong. But now he's breathing in space. And then I realised, if you're worrying about the fact that Superman can breathe in space, to refer back to what you were saying about you're taking it too seriously with the flying, it's because you've lost interest in the other stuff.
Maybe you can inhale krypton gas.
Yeah, or maybe you shouldn't even be thinking about it, because not all of us are scratching that itch all the time.
Oh, yes.
And so the stuff on Krypton at the beginning also, I've always found the kind of, I know everyone thinks that's interesting. I find that it looks like Legends of Ga'Hoole anyway, and it was a sort of, it was a strange dragony bit of Dungeons and Dragons, very, very CGI stuff that I wasn't interested in. Plus, of course, it says in the press notes that Snyder said it was going to be the most realistic film I've ever done, realism. And in capturing that realism, this is to quote the notes, the director chose to shoot on film and in 2D instead of native 3D, so there's a retrofit has gone on there. So I know some people have really taken against it. There have been some quite negative responses. I think there is interesting stuff in there. I think the last act is just like being shouted at so much that I stopped being interested, and so consequently there is an air of disappointment. I really wanted it to be the film about the fractured, difficult character. I wanted it to be everything that the title Man of Steel as opposed to Superman implied. There is some of that, and there is some great stuff with Kevin Costner as his dad. Really, I mean, that stuff. In fact, Kevin Costner steals the show. In a way, it's his movie. But the disappointment of the whole final act, because it was just everything turned up to, diggity, as I said before, to 11 stupid, did make you feel at the end tired and a little bit exhausted.